My name is Lieutenant Anna Hartley. I am 31 years old. I have been a military nurse for 8 years. And on a Tuesday morning in February, 6 weeks into my rotation in the secure medical ward at Cranfield Base, I was completing a routine assessment on my patient, a private named Owen Gale, admitted following injuries sustained during a training incident, when I noticed the absence of something that should have been there: a scar. Left forearm, inner surface, the kind that forms from a deep laceration that has healed over time and left a permanent mark. It was not there. I had not been looking for it. I had been conducting a standard assessment. But somewhere in the 6 weeks of routine care, the observations, the documentation, the particular familiarity that builds when you spend hours each week with the same patient, I had been half expecting to see it, without knowing why. I completed the assessment. I went back to my notes. I went back to the admission file. Owen Gale, 24 years old, no documented scarring on the left forearm. I sat at the nurse's station for a long time, and then I understood why I had been expecting to see a scar that was not in Owen Gale's file. Because the scar was not Owen Gale's. It was Kit Whitfield's.
Let me tell you about Kit Whitfield. Corporal Kit Whitfield had been in my unit 4 years ago. We had served together for 14 months at a base in a location I am not authorized to name. He had been a good soldier and a straightforward person, and we had the kind of working relationship that does not require much conversation, because the understanding runs without it. 7 years ago, before my time with him, before he joined my unit, Kit had been involved in a training accident during a live exercise that had left a significant laceration on his left inner forearm. I knew about it because he had mentioned it once when I had noticed the scar during a routine health assessment and had asked. He had described it briefly, I had noted it, filed it, moved on. 7 years later, I was expecting to see it on a patient who was not him. Not consciously, my conscious mind had been conducting a routine assessment on Owen Gale. But something below the level of conscious thought had been waiting for a scar that was not there. And when it was not there, the confusion resolved. The man in that bed was not Owen Gale. He was someone else. And Kit Whitfield was not where Kit Whitfield should have been.
The object at the center of everything was the admission file. Owen Gale, private, 24 years old, training incident, injuries documented, treatment plan set. I had read it on the day of admission 6 weeks ago. I had read it as a file. I had not read it with any reason to question it. I went back to it on Tuesday morning, and I read it differently. The injuries were documented, but the documentation was thin in the places where medical documentation is usually detailed. The treatment responses over 6 weeks had not followed the expected trajectory for the documented injuries. There had been small inconsistencies, things I had noted and set aside individually as variations within normal range, that assembled into a different picture when I looked at them together. I had been treating this man for 6 weeks. I had not been treating him for what the file said he had. I took the file to Nurse Sergeant Jane Bates, my senior colleague on the ward. I showed her what I had observed and what I had noted over 6 weeks. I did not tell her my conclusion yet. I asked her to read the file and tell me what she saw. She read it for 15 minutes. Then she said, "Something is wrong with this file." I said, "Yes." I said, "I need to speak to the ward commander." I want to pause here, because standing at a nurse's station on a Tuesday morning in February, understanding that the patient I had been caring for 6 weeks was not who his file said he was, and that the man who should have been in that bed was someone I had served alongside 4 years ago, is the moment this story became something I could not resolve through the ordinary channels of medical administration. If you have ever noticed something that should not be there, or something that should be there and was not, and followed it anyway, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now,
because what the ward commander told me when I brought her the file and what I found out about where Kit Whitfield actually was is the part that changed how I understood 6 weeks of routine care.
The ward commander. Lieutenant Colonel Frances Hooper had commanded the secure medical ward for 3 years. She listened to my account without interrupting. She looked at the file. She looked at my 6 weeks of nursing notes beside it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she made a phone call. She did not tell me who she called. She stepped out of her office to make it. She came back in 7 minutes. She said, "Anna, what I am about to tell you is classified above your current clearance level. I am authorized to share it with you because of what you have just brought to me, and because you have been providing care in this ward for 6 weeks without the context you needed." She sat down. She said, "The patient in bed 7 is not Owen Gale. His name is Private Daniel Marsh. He agreed to this arrangement voluntarily. He is receiving care for a genuine condition, not the one documented in the file. He has known for 6 weeks that the file is a cover." She said, "Corporal Kit Whitfield is safe. He is in a classified location receiving appropriate care. His documented presence in this ward has been maintained as a protective measure because there are people who would look for him in the military medical system, and we needed them to find a bed occupied." She said, "You found the substitution because you knew Whitfield personally and carried a piece of knowledge about him that was not in any file. His scar was not documented anywhere. It should not have been the thing that gave this away, and yet it was." She looked at me. She said, "I'm sorry you were not told. That was a decision made above my level, and I did not agree with it." Captain Oliver Fenn. He came to the ward on Wednesday, the intelligence officer who had managed the operation. He was in his mid-30s, and he had the manner of someone who calculates before he speaks, and has done this for long enough that the calculation is no longer visible. He sat across from me in the ward office, and he explained the shape of it. Kit Whitfield had witnessed something during a recent operation. The nature of what he had witnessed I am not authorized to discuss. What I can tell you is that it had made him a target, not from an external source, but from within the chain of command. Someone with authority over Kit's unit had reason to want Kit's account discredited or prevented. Moving Kit to a classified location while maintaining his apparent presence in the medical system had been the decision. It had kept him safe. The people looking for him had found bed 7 occupied by a file that said Kit Whitfield was there and not available for contact due to the nature of his injuries. The substitution had held for 6 weeks, until Tuesday morning, until a scar that was not in any file had not been where a nurse's memory had placed it. Fenn said, "We did not anticipate that element. A documented physical detail we could have controlled. An undocumented one was outside the parameters of what we planned for." He said it without defensiveness, as a professional acknowledgement of a gap in the planning. He said, "You should have been told. The decision not to inform ward nursing staff was a compromise I argued against and was overruled on."
Owen Gale, Private Daniel Marsh. I went to see him on Thursday. He was 26 years old. He had agreed to the arrangement because he had been asked, and because he had understood the reason, and because he had a temperament suited to 6 weeks under a secure ward with a name that was not his own. He said, "I hope you're not angry with me." I said, "You were in an uncomfortable situation because someone needed you to be. I'm not angry with you." He said, "I always felt bad that you were working hard on my behalf for a condition I didn't actually have." I said, "The care was real, whatever the condition was." He said, "It was." He said, "I used to watch you work and think, she is very good at this." I said, "Thank you." He said, "I mean it. Whatever happens next, you should know that." He said it simply, not to flatter, because he had spent 6 weeks watching someone do their job with care, and he wanted to say so.
It was one of the kindest things anyone has said to me in 8 years of this work.
Kit Whitfield. I was not told where he was during the operation. I was not told when he was moved or what the resolution of his situation was. 3 months after the Tuesday morning on the ward, I received a message through official channels, a brief message, 3 lines. It told me Kit was safe, that the matter he had witnessed had been properly investigated, and that he had given his account through the appropriate channels, that there would be no further risk to him. It was signed by Major General Patricia Drummond. It was not a personal message, it was a formal notification. But it told me what I needed to know. He was safe.
The admission file. The false file for Owen Gale, Private Daniel Marsh, has been corrected. His actual medical record now reflects his actual condition and treatment. Owen Gale does not exist in the system any longer. Kit Whitfield's medical record has been updated to reflect his actual location and treatment during the 6-week period. The documented presence in bed 7 has been removed. My 6 weeks of nursing notes remain. They are filed under the patient's actual name now, Private Daniel Marsh. The care documented in those notes was real. It happened. It deserves an accurate record. I requested that the notes be refiled correctly, and that request was granted. The notes are the truest thing in the whole 6 weeks. Whatever else was constructed around them, they represent what actually happened in that ward each day. Someone was cared for. That part was real.
Here is what a missing scar and 6 weeks of careful nursing taught me. The knowledge we carry about people is not always in files. A scar mentioned once during a routine health check 7 years ago, a note I had made and filed and moved on from. A detail that lived in my professional memory, not because it was significant at the time, but because I am the kind of nurse who notes things and files them and does not discard them. That detail was outside the parameters of what the operation planned for. It was inside the parameters of what good nursing does. We observe, we document, we notice when something is not where we expect it to be. We do not always know why we are noticing. Sometimes we find out 6 weeks later on a Tuesday morning. And sometimes what we find out is that the care we were giving was more real than anything else in the situation. That is the job. That is always the job. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She noticed what the file did not say. She followed it. She found him.